Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC TV show podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network Group. I am your host, Priscilla Welch. Welcome to a new week. Today, I will share with you some of my favorite Nickelodeon TV shows that you can rewatch on Hulu and Netflix. Let's start with Victorious. Stay tuned and I will reveal details about Danny Phantom. And again, I hope everyone is doing well this Monday. Now, in my previous episode, as you all know, I discussed 4 amazing shows that you can watch for your entertainment, especially if you love performing arts like singing, dancing, and acting. So there's a little history behind why I want to talk to you about these TV shows, particularly Victorious. So again, for those of you who love singing, dancing, anything with performing arts, like for me, again, I am from Brooklyn, New York originally. And so what happened was, as I was growing up, I was always into some type of arts, whether it was singing at the time, dancing at the time, acting, whatever. Of course, things happened over the years, and sometimes there's situations where it doesn't always go down that path or work out that way. But of course, I still love the arts, and I still, if anything, would love to pursue acting. However, when I was auditioning from middle school to high school. So when I say auditioning, there's these situations where, in my situation at least, where I could go ahead and perform for a performing arts high school. And I performed for LaGuardia High School in Queens, New York, which of course a lot of famous people have come from. And I also performed from Brooklyn High School of the Arts. And I was actually accepted for drama for that following year. But of course I moved to PA. Unfortunately. But, you know, again, things don't always go down the same path as you dreamed it would be. But, of course, you still have to take chances and opportunities of when it's granted to you. And, well, where I'm at now, it's still similar to some type of art, but it's more just using my voice, as you can see. And so what I found out with the Victorious at the time is, as I was actually going through high school out here in PA, when we did finally move, they finally created a show where it was kind of, you know, these kids are going to school and it's a performing arts high school. So that caught my interest right away. And I was just like, well, I can definitely relate to this because this is where I wanted to be. This is where I wanted to do. And I still do, even though I didn't go to a performing arts high school anymore. Because, you know, they have also, like, performing arts colleges, you know, things that are specific for the arts. And I was always in some type of choir, dance team, anything with, like, instruments, learning how to play the piano. And to see this come to life on Nickelodeon was just amazing. And, of course, the real actors and the cast and crew were all very multi-talented as well. I mean, as we all know, for example, one of the huge pop stars that we have in this name day is Ariana Grande. Ariana Grande actually started off on the show Victorious as Kat. And then, of course, we had Victoria Justice. Victoria Justice, however, did not actually, in my opinion, make it. As you all know, she actually was on Zoe 101 when she was younger. And so I even watched her from way back then on that show, which we also will be talking on the show later on today. And what's interesting is there was always some type of feud between Ariana Grande and Victoria Justice. And I think Victoria Justice was actually jealous of, like, a lot of her co-stars could sing better than her. And, of course, Ariana Grande, look at where she is now. So there was a lot of issues with that growing up, and they never kind of grew out of that. So, especially in one of Ariana Grande's songs, it's called Thank You Next. And throughout the people in her life, she actually congratulates for those who were willing to still support her as she was becoming and pursuing her dream. And Victoria Justice, she did not thank her. So we all know, like, they're still obviously will never become friends, and they will never mend at least maybe what they could have had. So I always thought that was interesting among the show. Like, that's the little drama that used to happen behind the scenes. So again, the air date actually for Victorious was March 27, 2010. And it actually ended back February 2nd, 2013. So it ran on for a good 3 years. And then the producers were at least a good few people. One of the main ones was Bruce Rand Berman. And the show actually had a number of 4 seasons. And one of the songs that always plays whenever you know the show's about to come on is called Make It Shine. And of course, Victoria Justice performs the show because her character is actually the main character of the show. And she plays the character Tori Vega, who actually had a sister that was already going to the art school. And when her sister Trina couldn't no longer perform, they were like, okay, well, I'll do it. So because her sister was always practicing all the time when they were home. And at the time, Tori was actually going to a normal high school. And they were like, yo, you can actually sing. Like, you need to come here and audition for us. And so the first episode is her literally singing in her sister's place and everyone realizing how much of an amazing voice she actually has. And then they asked her to audition for the show. And some of the famous stars' names besides Victoria Justice, we have Leon Thomas III, Matt Bennett, Elizabeth Gillies, Ariana Grande, Avon Hogia, and Daniela Monet. Daniela Monet actually plays Trina Vega. She actually is Tori Vega's older sister, one that had the issues and why she had to take her place. Of course, like I said, I already talked about Ariana Grande. We all know who that is. Avon Hogia, he actually moved on to do other acting. There was one show that he played, like he was like in a small town and he could see like dead people. It was a very interesting show. We can talk about that another time, of course. And of course, he was also on that famous show that, well, now what it's called, Freeform. He actually was on the show called Twisted, and it was supposed to be like a drama series, but it only happened for one season. They never continued after that. I guess it was like low reviews. I actually like the show. Maybe in one of the other podcasts, I'll probably talk about that. And then we have Elizabeth Gillies. She actually is on a show called Dynasty, and she actually made it pretty far too when it comes to acting, at least. And then, like I said, we had Matt Bennett. I'm not too sure. Matt Bennett and Leon Thomas III, they kind of moved away from the spotlight after a while. Even with Victoria Justice, I don't think she's currently doing anything right now either. They haven't really gotten much support, I would think, and much luck since the TV show had ended. I actually remember when this show first premiered. I remember how excited I was with my younger brother and sister, and we actually just finished watching the Kids' Choice Awards on Nickelodeon. That's when, back then, that used to be so cool, and we used to be excited for like all these different award shows that would come on, because it was some of our favorite celebrities that we would see, live on TV. And so it's a total of like 57 episodes. I actually wish they continued the show because I really loved it. I feel like it could have went further. I'm going to say this right now. I really wish that Avon Hogia's character and Victoria Justice's character actually ended up together and not him going back with Jade, which is Elizabeth Gillies' character. And the production team, of course, is Nickelodeon and Sunset Hollywood in Hollywood, California. And of course, they had like a simple multi-camera setup whenever they did the angles and the shots for each episode. And each episode, of course, is going to be about like half hour. But really, if you didn't have like a whole bunch of commercials on Nickelodeon, it would have been about like 24 minutes. And then other production companies that were involved with this show was Schneider's Bakery, Sony Music Entertainment, and Nickelodeon Productions. But the distributor was MTV Networks International. So it actually was stated back in like August 10, 2012 that the series is not going to be renewed. And then there was supposed to be a spin-off that was supposed to be successful after, which was Sam and Cat. And this is when Ariana Grande actually had a new show with the character that played Sam in iCarly. And that's another thing, like a lot of these Nickelodeon shows did. I feel like they also kind of took that with Disney Channel shows. Like, for example, there was one episode where Suite Life of Zack and Cody, That's So Raven, and a few other Disney Channel shows that were popular at the time did a crossover episode when they all were at the hotel together. Now, with Nickelodeon, Victorious and iCarly, they were the two popular like teen sitcom shows that actually were around on the same time, and that was with Miranda Cosgrove. And they actually, I think they did a couple of them, but there was like one episode where they kind of were dating the same guy and they both were being played, and that was Miranda Cosgrove and Victoria Justice characters. So afterwards, once they, we saw like there was like a kind of like behind the scenes like relationship, with all the Nickelodeon stars. And so what was interesting is how after high school, Kat went on to, I guess, move in with Sam. And there were actually a lot of like rumors that Ariana Grande, I believe, her character was actually getting paid more than Sam's character, because I feel like at the time she was more popular. So they really didn't even continue on with that TV show either. And like I said, there was always some type of beef with like Victoria Justice and some of the other characters, because a lot of times when they did tributes for each other, or if they ever did any interviews, a lot of times her name wasn't mentioned. And then a lot of people said it's because she's jealous of the fact that her co-stars were more talented than her. Like, they can actually really sing. Even down to Elizabeth Gillies. Elizabeth Gillies and Ariana Grande used to do a lot of songs together and a lot of covers. And even Leon Thomas III, like, he's very talented. He could sing, he could do the guitar. And one of the other characters as well, he always had a puppet with him. He could play guitar, sing in real life, and he was able to also do the puppet motions and everything as a ventriloquist. A lot of people can't do that. So for him to do that, pretty much triple threat. So overall, my opinion of the show, I really loved it. However, like I said, I really wish like Avian Hogia's character and Victoria's character, Victoria's character, they actually went ahead and, I think ended up together, besides him ending it back up with his girlfriend who was like on and off on the show, which is Elizabeth Gillies' character. And I felt like it would have been more interesting. And I think it would have been interesting to see if Robbie's character as well, like what happened with him on the show, because he was always kind of excluded out a lot of times until he finally gained more and more acceptance as they actually realized like he could sing and he could do this, but it wasn't really shown a lot and showcased a lot on the show. It was more focused a lot of times on Victoria Justice, and I feel like that's where a lot of people had an issue, because it was just like she's like one of the least talented people that was part of like the cast and crew. However, she can act, because she did do a lot of TV shows and movies afterwards, Victorious. She actually starred in 2015. It was scripted MTV thriller called Eye Candy, and she played Janet Wise in the TV remake of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So I actually watched that. Actually turned out pretty well. Victoria Justice also starred in some other shows called The Queen America and American Housewife, as well as Man with a Plan. And she also attends like New York Fashion Week, I guess, to kind of stay in the spotlight. And then she also did To All the Boys I've Loved Before and Summer Night. And now we're going to get into one of my favorites. He's a singer, he's a songwriter, and a pianist. And this is Leon Thomas III. So right now what he does, he juggles anything between like acting with his music career. He released a track, Hello, How Are You, with Wiz Khalifa. And he also helped produce and write songs for Ariana Grande's album, which is Yours Truly. He also worked with Post Malone on his 2016 album called Stoney. And then he did a collaboration of some sort of Fifth Harmony, like with Lauren, the singer. And in August 2018, Thomas released an EP titled Genesis, with Rolling Stone described as one of the best mixing creamy guitar soul with easygoing break beats. And I quote. So yeah, and he appeared in Daryl in the Catherine Bigelow drama show Detroit. And you also might have seen him on season 2 of the Golden Globe nominated show Insecure. So that's kind of where he's at. And of course we have Ariana Grande, but I don't even need to talk about her. I mean, she's a Grammy winning musician, as we all know. So yeah. Then we also have Avian Hogia. Again, I talked a little bit about his, but he starred in Zombieland. I do remember that now. He was in Zombieland 2. That was the recent thing that he did when it comes to his acting. He played kind of like a stoner / hippie. It was actually pretty funny, but it was kind of like a short acting like visual that we got of him. I wish he could do more. And then he has a book that's released. It's called Mixed Feelings, and it has like poems and stories. He also did Teen Vogue. And he also is on board with the Victoria Justice reunion. So Victoria Justice announced that she would love to do another spin-off of the show, but I don't know how that's going to work if she and Ariana Grande can't even get along. Finally, to Elizabeth Gillies, as I stated before, she's on that TV show on the CW called Dynasty. And it was actually a remake, but they're actually due for like their 4th season. And then she recently actually married producer Michael Corcoran in August 2020. So she is now happily married. And then we have Matt Bennett, like I told you, that's Robert Shapiro's character. He actually is going to be on season 2 of American Vandal. That's what he's currently doing. And he also was in the Thank You Next music video with Ariana Grande and, like I said, her other co-stars, except for Victoria Justice. And he also reunited with some of Victoria's co-stars in Halloween party hosted by Ariana Grande, and that was back in like 2019. So as you can see, they're still kind of connected. He's guest starred on several popular TV shows over the years, including Shameless, The Big Bang Theory, and Grey's Anatomy. So he's actually doing pretty well for his career, even though he wasn't always like shown on the TV show when it happened. And then we have Daniela Monet. She actually was also in Thank You Next as well. And she's right now vegan. She is an outspoken supporter of animal rights. And she actually has a website and a YouTube channel, and she tells a lot about like healthy recipes, beauty tips, and like fitness routines that you could do. And she actually got engaged to her boyfriend, who was Andrew Gardner, and she actually just recently had her first child back in September 2019, because she was always one of like the oldest ones too. She's about like 31 now, and even like Robert Shapiro, he's about like 28. So that's all I have today for you folks for the TV show Victorious. Again, you could go ahead and watch that on Netflix, all 3 to 4 seasons. And I believe the show is also on Hulu. All right, everyone, we're going to cut to break now. And coming up after the break, we're going to talk about one of the best TV shows that ever aired on Nickelodeon, and it is called Zoe 101. So don't go anywhere.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Welcome back from the break, everyone. So thank you again so much for tuning in on this glorious Monday. Like I said before, we just finished discussing about the TV show called Victorious, and now we're going to discuss some other Nickelodeon shows that I've watched growing up. And another Nickelodeon show that was very interesting when it came to a teen sitcom, and I feel like this is like one of the first successful ones, is Zoe 101. Yes, you heard it here first, folks. We had, of course, Jamie Lynn Spears, Britney Spears' baby sister, who went ahead and was the star of the show. And it went on for actually a lot of seasons. It was very popular growing up. I remember my older cousins used to be obsessed with the show. And of course, you know, following whoever at the time was the older ones, I would watch the show as well. And I actually found out it was pretty interesting, so I kind of grew up on the show. And I remember getting like the DVDs to it, like borrowing it, so that way I can watch it from like my cousins, or they'll sometimes borrow movies and stuff like that from us, you know, back when like DVD and Blu-ray was actually popular. Now all we do is stream, right? So with Zoe 101, it was like a few cast members that was on the show, and they all were basically kind of like in a boarding school type of campus. And the show is a comedy and a drama. It actually wasn't just for teens. I feel like a lot of adults and their families watched the TV show too because of how good the acting was, and it was pretty entertaining. It was pretty funny. It kind of gives you like a younger version to maybe what The Office would be like. That's how I'd probably compare it to. And it actually aired from January 9, 2005 until May 2nd, 2008. It actually felt pretty longer than that. I feel like they did more than one season. But the rest of the cast is Paul Butcher, Sean Flynn, Kristen Herrera, Christopher Massey, Alexis Nicholas, Aaron Sanders, Matthew Underwood, Victoria Justice, and Austin Butler. And actually, some music composers, which is pretty interesting, is actually Britney Spears herself, Christian Carlson, Pontus Winberg, and Henrik Johnback. And the opening theme was actually Jamie Lynn Spears singing the song Follow Me. And that's when we kind of found out, like, hey, she's not just Britney Spears' younger sister anymore. This is her coming into her own. And there was actually rumors that there might be a Zoe 101 spinoff, but we're not sure if that's confirmed yet. And there was a number of 4 seasons as well for this show, with a list of like 61 episodes One of the main executive producers was Dan Schneider. And again, the production company was Schreiner's Bakery, again, just like Victorious. Then we had Apollo Pro Movie, Nickelodeon Productions, and Dolphin Entertainment. The original network, of course, is Nickelodeon. And the plot, basically, for this TV show, if you've never heard of it before, is how Zoe Brooks basically had a brother named Dustin, and then it's all about her friends who basically attend this school called PCA. And that was literally, like, all you talked about, literally almost every episode, because of how much they loved going to school there. And it was in Southern California. And it was actually initially filmed at a university called Pepperdine in Malibu, California. And then some stages were in Valencia, California, actually beginning in season 3 when they did this. But it was a very outstanding children's program that was actually set, and they won an Emmy in 2005 for it. And it was actually one of the most expensive production series to ever been shot for when it comes to Nickelodeon. That's how much the show, I feel like, it kept taken on for decades and decades, because it's one of the most high rated and successful shows that actually ever happened. I feel like it was very realistic, and that's kind of what people wanted. Like, some people wanted to go to school and be with their friends all the time, and they could kind of relate to that show. And the actual real drama among the show too was very popular. And there's several soundtracks and video games that are actually based on the series, but they have also been produced and released. And the series officially ended in production in August 2007 after shooting its final season, and which began airing 5 months later in January 2008. Because actually, Jamie Lynn Spears actually got pregnant really, really young, and that's kind of what ended her career in a way, because ever since she had that child back in 2007, she actually never really continued again doing the show, and because it was kind of unexpected. So the show could have continued, but it didn't. So to further read, basically, after shooting its final season, which began after 5 months later in January 2008, Spears' pregnancy made this season controversial. However, the show was not canceled due to her pregnancy. It was not until October 2007, which was 2 months after the final season wrapped up production, that the Zoe 101 staff learned about her pregnancy. So she actually didn't tell her co-stars and the casting crew right away until when it actually I guess she known for sure when she wanted to finish that final season. And so what the cast does now is, we'll get into in a little bit, but I just want to say this, if we all remember, I think one of the biggest highlights of that show was when they all did a time capsule of where would they be in 10 years after they graduated from PCA. And as we all know, Jamie Lynn Spears' character would have ended up with Chase, and she actually left an episode where they did a 10 years later type of thing, and it was actually Chase's character and Michael's character, and they were actually watching the clips of the time capsule, and how Zoe basically said before she was to follow her dream and go to England was that she wanted to be with Chase, and that she was aware of his crush, and it's just that she never acted on it because of how she probably felt. Maybe it wasn't going to work out at the time. But it literally came at a coincidence, because this is around the time where Chase and her actually broke up years later, and what happens is he actually was getting ready to propose to another woman. And so what ended up happening in that revival episode was when he basically was left on a cliffhanger with that video, because he's still technically in love with her, and he wanted to see, I guess, where it would go after that, now that he will run after her this time. But back in 2019, Jamie Lynn Spears, this is when she really started getting back more into the spotlight ever since the show ended. And she actually said in a podcast that in May 2020, she was going to think about doing a reboot of the show. And I feel like a lot of fans will actually be very grateful for that, because to see Chase and her maybe together again, even with probably more production money behind it this time, because it was one of the most successful shows ever. I mean, even if they made it a movie type of thing, I would love to see that, just to see where all their lives went after the show, and how the characters, they became more just not characters on a show, but they became characters in any household that grew up watching this show. And me being 23 now, I'm looking back, and I remember I actually used to love playing video games, but not the video games now, of course, more depending on what it is, maybe Mortal Kombat or something like that. But the video games that I had back then, it was called the Game Boys, and you had the Game Boy Advance, and then afterwards PSs, DSs, all these other different things started coming out. And Game Boy actually did a Zoe 101 game, which was released back in like March 2007, and then they did another one called Zoe 101 Field Trip Fiasco, which was September 11, 2007 on the Nintendo DS. So those games were very popular on those two gaming systems at the time. And of course, we don't really have nothing like that now these days. And then another interesting sibling duo that also was on this show is Christopher Massey. He actually played Michael Barrett. And, you know, back then he was known for like being a rapper, actor, comedian. But his younger brother, he actually was Corey, the character for That's a Raven. And then he had his spin-off show with Disney Channel called Corey in the House. And later on, a few years back, he actually did Dancing with the Stars. So I always thought that was interesting, the connections between Zoe 101, because we have Jamie Lynn Spears, then we have Britney Spears as the singer, and then you have Christopher Massey, and of course his brother Kyle Massey. And finally, I have the moment you all been waiting for as well. So we have like, what is the current cast doing right now? And we have Jamie Lynn Spears. She's actually on the popular TV show called Sweet Magnolias, which is on Netflix. And it started hitting streaming May 19, 2020. It's actually based on Cheryl Wood's book series. It got renewed for a second season in July 2020. And many fans speculate as Zoe 101, and due to her pregnancy at 60 years old, in a now deleted Instagram post from 2019, the actress said that the show ended because her contract was finished, not because she was pregnant. I don't believe that's true. But this is actually, I'm getting this from insider.com. And in 2020, cover story for Nylon, the actress said that she didn't become pregnant until probably 6 months after we wrapped up or something like that. But as I stated before earlier in this podcast, that they actually wrapped up the final season, and then she was already pregnant for at least a good 2 months before the show actually ended. And then when they all found out, they didn't continue afterwards. Then after her time in Nickelodeon, Spears switched her focus to singing, much like her older sister Britney. She released country music, and she dropped an EP in 2014. It's called The Journey, and she collaborated with her sister for a track called Chilling With You. And then Zoe 101 also performed at Nashville's Grand Ole Opry and the 2017 CMA Music Festival. In addition, she participated in a tribute to Britney at the 2017 Radio Disney Music Awards. And then she reunited, again, like I told you, to Nickelodeon 2018 as a contestant on the show Double Dare. And then she gave birth to her first child with her then boyfriend, Casey Aldridge, a daughter named Maddie Bryan, in June 2008. And they always had an on and off again relationship, including an engagement, but they finally split in 2010. And she went on to marry Jamie Watson in March 2014 in Louisiana, and then she gave birth to a daughter named Ivy Joan 4 years later. Then in 2017, Maddie had a near-fatal ATV accident. She recovered, and Spears marked the miracle anniversary with a lengthy post on Instagram. And then now we have Butcher, who basically was Dustin on the show, and he played Zoe Brooks' younger brother. And he actually starred on the show Criminal Minds, and then he appeared on shows like My Music. He's been releasing music actually since 2010, in addition to cover tracks of Mercy from Shawn Mendes and Love Yourself from Justin Bieber. Then we have Sean Flynn. He played Chase, which was Zoe's best friend, and then later on the lover. And nowadays, he actually works as a producer at an entertainment company called Donatello Arm. And then we have Matthew Underwood. He was Logan Reese. He was like that popular rich kid for PCA. No one really liked him as much. But he is now a current filmmaker. He's directed and starred in a bunch of shorts and TV movies like The Unicorn Sisters, The Alien, and The Golden Stars. And he's filled with photos of himself on film sets and snaps of him as Zoe 101 co-stars. Then we have Christopher Massey. He was Michael Barrett, another best friend of Zoe and Chase. And he is now a musician and a father. So we have another parent here. And then we have Erin Sanders. She played Quinn. And she was like the book smart, nerdy type. And she actually, I know, was like really, really in love with like Logan. Because at first they despised each other and they always had like some issue going on, but they secretly began dating. And she now is on another popular Nickelodeon show. She was on Big Time Rush, and she played actually Camille Roberts, and she was supposed to be like an aspiring actress and love interest of Logan. Then she also was on a few shows called Mad Men, Castle, and CSI Miami. And then we have Alexa Nicholas. She actually was like really like into boys, like that was her character. But she basically stayed out the spotlight in recent years. But she actually did do a few things. She actually was on The Suite Life of Zack and Cody, Supernatural, and Criminal Minds. And her last roles were in 2013 of The Mad Men and The Walking Dead. And then we have Kristen Herrera. She actually played Dana Cruz, and she was the original roommate. But right now she actually has a role on General Hospital, so she's still doing a bit of acting as herself. And then finally we have Victoria Justice. As we were just discussing, obviously she did Victorious like years later. But I know she replaced Dana as Zoe and Nicole's new roommate, and Lola had big dreams of becoming an actress. And then, like I said, she starred with Ariana Grande for 4 seasons between 2010 and 2013. And then she virtually reunited with that entire cast, Victorious, in March 2020. But then she also did shows like iCarly. She guest starred on there. As I told you before, there was crossovers. Also with True Jackson VP. That show's not talked about a lot, but that was actually Keke Palmer's Nickelodeon TV show. And she also starred on a short-lived MTV thriller called Eye Candy, which is from R.L. Stine, which is what I was talking about before. Rocky Horror Picture Show, and yada yada yada. And then we also have Austin Butler. He was the final love interest for Zoe. He's actually a very, very known actress. I know, like, he recently was in a relationship with Vanessa Hudgens. He actually is supposed to be starring as Tom Hanks in a new movie, which is specifically about Tom Hanks' biopic. And he recently even, like, had his hair dyed and everything. I feel like it's a bit of method acting going on here. But after Zoe went on one, he did Ruby and the Rockets, Life Unexpected, Switched Up Earth, The Carrie Diaries. He did Sex and the City. He did the Shannara Chronicles, which I actually did watch. It didn't last for very long, but it was pretty cool. And he was also seen on Arrow and CSI New York. And he also starred in The Dead Don't Die and also Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he, like I said, was also in a relationship with Vanessa Hudgens, but they split after being 9 years together. So I thought that was like it for them. And that's what we have for the cast then and now for Zoe 101. Again, you could go ahead and watch the show, I believe, on Amazon Prime, Hulu, but you could actually watch the show on CBS All Access as long as you have a subscription. And now we're coming up to our other break, so stay tuned, because coming up after another popular TV shows that was based on an internet web TV series called iCarly. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back from the break, everyone. If you're now tuning in, we just finished discussing one of the most watched TV shows in all Nickelodeon history, and literally for children's shows, and it is called Zoe 101. And again, you can go ahead and watch that show on CBS All Access. But right now we're going to get into another the second most popular Nickelodeon show and for children, and was actually nominated for the same award that Zoe 101 had for like the most outstanding children's program for 5 times. And this show, iCarly, it actually aired in September 8, 2007, and then it ended November 23rd, 2012. The series actually stars Miranda Cosgrove, Jeanette McCurdy, Nathan Kress, and Jerry Traynor. And it's all about the story of Carly Shay. Now, you may know Miranda Cosgrove from Drake and Josh. She played the younger sister of both Drake and Josh. And it was a very interesting TV show as well. One of also another popular TV shows that was on Nickelodeon. And with iCarly, this is something where she wasn't just known as always their younger sister anymore. And what I liked about the show is it kind of introduced a new way of what teenagers kind of did for like fun, entertainment, or even maybe a way to make money. And to me, this was like a perfect example of how popular you can get when it comes to the internet or something with social media. Because the technology that was used in iCarly, even Victorious, they used to have this thing called Pear phones or Pear iPad. And it literally was technology that was shaped as a pear, actually. And it was their phones and there was their iPads. And they had very advanced technology for like the computers and stuff in the show. However, I don't know exactly behind the scenes of how they were able to benefit from that and what exactly they used, but it was very cool to see on the show, these weird shaped phones. But with iCarly, the way the episode actually started the season was it was her and her best friend, Sam, which is played by Jeanette McCurdy, which I told you earlier. Later on, she does do a show with Ariana Grande called Sam and Cat. But on iCarly, this was literally one of the funniest shows I've ever watched. And it's one of those shows where even now, being 23, I can go back and watch over and over again. But it started the web TV series called iCarly because of Carly. And that's her name. And they said, like, okay, well, let's name it that. And she was, of course, the star of the show. But Sam was always right there with her. And then, of course, they had Freddie, who was the cameraman because he was good with, like, editing, putting videos together. And at the time, he actually recorded them, like, when they were doing, like, a audition, actually, for their school. And it was them just acting goofy and doing these things on the show. And then he films it but doesn't tell them. And then later on, when it was, like, put out there online, everyone's just like, wow, this is actually really good content. And that's what started the entire iCarly series, and that's how they were able to come up with episodes like every week. They had a lot of guests. They did a lot of crazy things on the show that kept people entertained. And they even had some competition as well with other people that had a web internet TV series. Again, like I said, they did a crossover with Victoria Justice, and Victoria Justice has known them as also from just being on the internet for their web TV series as iCarly. But iCarly, of course, their cast, they never really knew the Victoria's cast, at least like the characters and everything, because they were still trying to make it into fame and singing and stuff like that. But it was a very interesting show. The show itself, it carried a lot of behind the scenes sound effects that they did for the web TV series for the actual show. And it was cool because it actually make Freddie's character really look like he knew what he was doing behind the camera. The show had a total of 6 seasons and total number of 97 episodes. One of the main producers, of course, again, is Dan Schneider. He's like everywhere. And again, it's Miranda Cosgrove, Jeanette McCurdy, Nathan Kress, Jerry Trainer, and Noah Monk. Again, it's a teen sitcom. The production location is Nickelodeon on Sunset, and then later on for like that final season, it was KTLA Studios. And they use like videotape and a multi-camera like setup, as you can see if you watch the show. And one episode alone is about like 23 minutes, of course, without commercials. So during the first 5 seasons, the show, like I said, was actually taped in Nickelodeon Sunset and then moved on to KTLA Studios in Hollywood. And it was, again, nominated for Emmy Award for Outstanding Children's Program 5 times. The most watched out of all the shows, I Saved You. But the popular one is I Goodbye, which was the last episode of the finale. And, sorry, the popular episode that I was watched many times was I Saved Your Life. I think what I liked about this show is how Miranda Cosgrove, her character, was so very different from Drake and Josh's little sister at the time when she was on their show. And even after all that, she actually was still pretty close with both of the men when they grew up, because actually the theme song to her song, Leave It All to Me, Drake Bell, actually, he does singing and he's a musician in real life, so he actually did perform on the song with her. And what I find interesting is how her character is completely different. She's completely grown, especially if you used to see her as a child, so it was very strange because you kind of grew up with her. And she was into boys now, she was in high school, she was getting ready for college, things like that. And I definitely love the relationship between all 3 characters with Sam, Freddie, and Carly. And Freddie basically had a thing for Carly all the time, like her character. But then he also ended up having a thing with Sam as well, which was also very interesting. And I actually liked how they did that because Sam used to annoy him a lot and bully him. And I love it when there's like those situations where you kind of like are always friends with that person, or you always tease them or bully them or whatever, but then really you just don't know how to express your real emotions about how you feel about that person. Enough about the show. I know you all are curious if you are fans of the iCarly TV show of Where Are the Cast Now, and I actually have this information from insider.com, and this is about, of course, 8 years later. Everyone, of course, looks different. They grew up, and this information was actually released out in June 26, 2020. So Noah Monk, he actually played Gibby on the iCarly show. He actually is still acting and I'll talk a little bit more about him. But to get into, of course, the star of the show, Miranda Cosgrove, I honestly get the vibe that she's like one of the sweetest people ever when it comes to like from teen acting and transitioning into adult. But of course, she actually went to college afterwards to University of Southern California, and she actually does a lot of like voiceover work for Despicable Me franchise. She first appeared in 2010 doing that. She plays Margot, the oldest sister, and then she did it again in 2013 and 2017. But she also appeared on the NBC comedy series Crowded, and it's a horror film. And then she also did series Crowded, and then she also did a horror film called The Intruders 2015. And her latest projects include a role with North Hollywood, a film about becoming a pro skater, and a guest appearance on an episode of the ABC's The Goldbirds. Jeanette McCurdy, she did actually this one show on Netflix later on. She's still acting, and she also does comedy. So after iCarly ended, she moved on to Sam and Cat, as we discussed. And then she also did, like I said, that TV show called Between, and it was actually a Canadian sci-fi series that she did for Netflix. A few years later, she wrote and directed the short film Kenny, which is back in 2018. And then earlier this year, she began performing her tragic comedy one-woman show, I'm Glad My Mom Died, in Los Angeles. But all her upcoming performances are currently canceled, of course, because of the pandemic, so it kind of ruined things for her. Then we have Nathan Kress, who played Freddie, of course, and he actually, after iCarly, he did a sketch for Jimmy Kimmel Live, and he voiced characters on the multi-network TV shows called Shuriken School. He also did some guest roles with, including CBS's Without a Trace and Disney Channel's The Suit Life of Zack and Cody. And then Kress is still acting, and he has a podcast, which is also pretty interesting. So he continued his career. He actually did one episode after iCarly ended, and he played Freddie again on Sam and Cat. And then he also continued his career in the entertainment industry and appeared in a few films. So he did Into the Storm. He did also some voice acting for various Star Wars projects too. And Kress recently worked on full screens Alive in Denver, which is another, and Netflix's Pinky Malinky. He and actor Brett DeVerne also host the podcast Radioactive Dads, which features conversations between friends about parenting and life. And then Jerry Trainer, who played Spencer Shea, he was the older brother to iCarly. Before he played Carly's older brother, Spencer Shea actor Jerry Trainer was well known as Crazy Steve on the Nickelodeon show Drake and Josh. So he's actually another character, or another actor, I should say, that was on Drake and Josh and got his fame from there, and then was able to start playing Spencer with Carly on the show iCarly. And then he also previously appeared on a variety of hits TV series from the early aughts. But right now, he continues to act on some movies and some television shows. Most recently, he appeared on Netflix's No Good Nick, and he also appeared on an episode of Disney Channel's Bunked. And he was also starring in the show Wendell and Vinny, and he did a voiceover for Tuff, Tuff, Tough Puppy. And then Gibby, as I stated, he also has done some acting. So he actually guest starred on Wizards of Waverly Place. He did a few of those. And he also did the Goldbergs. He's actually one of the stars on that show. And he did reprise his role for a little bit called Gibby in Sam and Cat. And in addition to that, he also produced electronic music under the aliases Noxic and Sad World Beats. So if you ever want to use those, that's where it's from. So that's all we have for that cast. We also have Freddie's mom, and she actually reprised her role as Marissa again in Sam and Cat, and she continued in Two Broke Girls, and she also did Disney Channel's Bunked. Her most recent project, however, is 2019's Zack comedy show Between Two Ferns, the movie. So that is what everyone is doing then and now since iCarly. So again, you can go ahead and watch the show on CBS All Access, Pluto TV, even Amazon Prime. That's where you can kind of watch the show right now. However, they didn't get it to, I believe it was on Netflix for a time, but they took it off. I do remember that. But we haven't really seen it on Netflix or like Hulu, some of the channels that most of the time people actually have. So that's all we have today for iCarly. Coming up next, one of my favorite animated TV series. It is called Danny Phantom. You don't want to go anywhere.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back from the break, everyone. Again, thank you so much for today, and thank you so much for listening and tuning in. We truly appreciate it. I truly appreciate it. And now, coming to a close, our final show that we will be talking about today is called Danny Phantom, and it's one of my favorite shows because, of course, I love anything that has to do with like superpowers or aliens or ghosts, and that's really what this show is all about. It actually would have been perfect to talk to you guys about around Halloween. I should have added that, but maybe next year. But Danny Phantom, however, is about a young boy who is like a ghost hybrid, and his parents actually are ghost catchers, and they build this crazy machine, which is part of like the opening theme song of Danny Phantom, and he somehow, I guess, checks it out after they leave, of course, with everything off, and at least they thought it was. And him going into this machine basically turned him half ghost, but still he was able to keep some of his humanity, and ever since then he kind of became like a teenage boy superhero who basically fights all the evil ghosts and tries to get them back into the ghost portal or the ghost world. And eventually he finds out that his parents will still continue to do that job because they believe ghosts are real, but they never really actually see the ghost until like a couple episodes, but then they do have to get like their brain like washed. And then it's more like he has these friends who basically help him to catch the ghost as well. And this is what becomes like their spree all the time. But one thing that was interesting about the show is his older sister Jazz at first never really was into this type of stuff until she actually was revealed the truth, and she realized that Danny actually does have a lot of burden on his shoulders because he actually has to be a superhero, and then on top of that he is a half ghost. It's always cool whenever you have like the main character of the show who always is trying to have a double life or a secret identity, who then he has loved ones who actually or she that find out about their secret, and it's cool to see like then the entire family like works together. And I feel like this is one of the shows for Nickelodeon that kind of inspired like future shows that did that, where like your entire family realizes that you do have a double identity. And the show is basically, the genres are action, adventure, fantasy, comic, science fiction, and superhero. It was actually created by Butch Hartman, and it was developed by Steve Marmel, Mark Banker, and Butch Hartman again. The different voices that played for the different characters of the show was David Kaufman, Tara Strong, Gray Delisle, Ricky Deshawn Collins, Colleen Villard, Rob Paulson, Kath Soucie, Martin Mull, Kevin Michael Richardson, and D. Bradley Baker. And the music composer was Guy Moon and Butch Hartman. The opening theme song was called Danny Phantom, which was performed by Derek Batiste and Guy Moon. And the ending theme was instrumental. It was a number of 3 seasons, full 53 episodes. Again, I really wish they continued with the show. It was pretty interesting to watch and very entertaining. The original release date was actually April 3rd, 2004, and it ended August 24, 2007. And it actually, the show received the Annie Award nominations, and it was generally positive reviews from like critics and audiences for a TV show for kids. Of course, it had many home video releases, toys, and various other merchandise that came along with the show. Like, this show, I feel like would have been very successful if it became a live action. It would be pretty cool to see the different effects that they could do, the CGI for being half ghost and half human. And the characters on the show, we had Danny Fenton / Danny Phantom, and of course he's the protagonist of the show. Then we had Sam, who was basically ended up became each other's love interest, Danny and Sam. And that was one of his best friends, and she's a gothic type of girl. And then we had Tucker Foley. Tucker Foley was actually his best friend, who actually was a black boy that was on the show. So I did like how he was very obsessed, but he was into like technology, and he always carried a PDA so that way he could learn how to do things. But then he literally obsessed over girls as well, so he was kind of a ladies' man. And then, as I mentioned before, we had Jasmine, which is Jazz Fenton, and then we had Jack Fenton, which is Danny's father, and we have Maddie Fenton, his mother, and we have Vlad Masters, Vlad Plasmus, And he actually attended school with Jack and Maddie because they all were scientists at first, and they were all interested in ghosts. And he had an incident where he basically was jealous of the fact that Jack took his girl at the time, because I believe they were together at first. But then he ended up getting ghost powers after that incident that happened in the lab, and he later becomes a ghost, but he's like filthy rich as well. And he always found some way, like years later, to try and see if he can get back Danny's mom, but it never worked. And so the behind the scenes voiceovers for each of these characters: David Coffin played Danny Phantom, Gray Delisle played Sam, Colleen O'Shaughnessy, she played Jazz. Then we had Ricky Deshaun Collins, he played Tucker Foley. Rob Paulson played Jack Fenton. Kath Soucie played Madeline Fenton. The vice principal for the school was played by Ron Perlman. You may know him from like many shows. And Dash Baxter was played by S. Scott Bullock. And Ember McLean was played by Tara Strong. Paulina was played by Maria Barrera, and she actually, you know her from Wizards of Waverly Place. She played the Russo siblings' mother. And we had D. Bradley Baker, who played Lance Thunder. Youngblood was played by Taylor Lautner, or Martinville played Vlad. Eric Roberts played Dark Danny. Mark Hamill played Undergrowth, and then we had Perry Gilpin. Going back to what I was saying about living a double life and basically having to hide that secret from your family and your parents. Like I said, for a while, like a little bit after a while, his sister did find out eventually before the parents did. But when the one episode that happened called Reality Trip is when Danny was basically caught off guard, and he actually had to quit his summer plans because one of the villains on the show named Freak Show revealed like his entire identity to the world. So then everyone found out who Danny Phantom really was. And here are some secrets that are cool about that make our eyes green with power for Danny Phantom coming up next. From thegamer.com, these are 20 things that we missed about Danny Phantom. And I love it when they do this to like TV shows that were popular, because they want you to know like the exact origins and how this show started in the first place. So, you know, Nickelodeon have kind of glossed over the whole accident that Danny Phantom actually like went through, but the whole story gets told in the theme song, and it talks about how his DNA got fused with ghost ectoplasm, but they kind of ignore the fact that his lab accident was extremely hard. And he's not really like happy about that situation like in the theme song, but in reality he was actually screaming from what was going on with him. But he actually perished during that accident. But thanks to the ghost ectoplasm machine, he became part ghost. So he may have gotten cool powers, but they came at a pretty high price. And it's much greater element to the TV series that they don't really like to talk about in detail, because who would want to watch that afterwards? And the show gave a new meaning to at war with yourself type of thing. So Danny Phantom actually really has a dark analogy to the entire series. So for most of the part, Danny's human half, basically what I'm trying to say, and half ghosts are always at war with each other, because they're technically the same person, but not really. So he's usually able to transform from ghost to human pretty easily, and there's not much distinction between the two. But if you try to separate the two, things actually could go pretty bad, and then you have Dark Danny. So there's actually an alternate future where after losing his family and friends, Danny tries to have Vlad remove his human half from his ghost half in order to stop feeling the pain, but things actually go crazy wrong, and his ghost half then removes the ghost half of Vlad, absorbs that, and then destroys Danny's human half. So imagine having your half of you trying to eliminate the other half. So this dark future did not end well for poor Danny. Let's just say that. Something's up with this guy. So Vlad is probably the only other person like Danny who, like I said, is like half ghost, half human, because of the incident that happened when he actually went to school with Danny's parents. And he actually got his powers through, again, like a lab incident, but it was actually caused by Danny's father, which is why he always have like this hatred for him. And then afterwards, that's what made him feel like he lost the love of his life as well. But he's also known as Plasmith, and he isn't as heroic as Danny, as we all know from the show. But what's weird about him is that he's not so much of a villain, but his most motivations behind him becoming a villain. So he has two big goals. He wants to eliminate Danny's father in revenge, then he wants to marry Danny's mother. So, yeah, he's a creep. But he can't let go of the past, and he's gone through a couple decades of his life feeling like he's been cheated out of happiness. And that's kind of like where but majority of villains' backstory starts from. Get more of like the weird things that a lot of fans probably don't know from that website, from thegamer.com. There's also a few things that fans may not even realize actually on the show. So as we all know, Rob Paulsen, he voiced Jack Fenton, but he also voiced Box Ghost and many others, which is Technus, which is one of the big villains that was on the Danny Phantom show. But he did base his voice after comedian Gilbert Gottfried from Iago from Aladdin. So interesting, Paulsen will go on to guest star on Gottfried's Amazing Colossal podcast. Then we have No Vampires, No Problem. So this is where a former colleague / friend of Danny's parents, Vlad Plasmus, was arguably Danny's most dangerous adversary. He is one of the few villains who knew the secret identity of Danny and could have revealed it like any time on the show. When he was being developed, however, they considered making him actually a vampire. However, Nickelodeon thought vampires were too evil, so like the crew decided to like have him just be a half ghost instead. Just very weird if it did happen that way. And then we also have like Sam's Jewish heritage that was kind of showcased a lot on the show. So this was again best friend, and she later became girlfriend to Danny. But she was actually Nickelodeon's first Jewish teen, which is pretty cool. And then she joined a line of other Nickelodeon Jewish characters named Tommy /Dill/Dee Pickles, Harold Berman and his family, Eugene Horowitz, and Oscar Kokosha. So this was revealed in a Christmas episode, which is The Fright Before Christmas. And Sam's faith was referenced when she and Tucker were partners for a school project where they had to take care of a flour sack in place of a child, which she named Lilith. And in Jewish mythology, Lilith is a demon. Remember, she's God. Then we have a Fairly Odd cast reunion. So it was actually, like I said, a lot of times with Nickelodeon, they would do crossover shows, and they did one with Fairly Odd Parents. And it's funny because Fairly Odd Parents also did a crossover with Jimmy Neutron. So again, it's not uncommon for creators to also rehire actors. So where they worked before, so case in point, when they did cast Danny Phantom, Butch Hartman saw many of the cast members of Fairly Odd Parents cross over into his ghostly superhero show. What's notable is that Fairly Odd Parents was Hartman's first show before he moved on to Danny Phantom. And then some of the returning cast members were Gray Griffin Delisle, which was Sam Manson. Then we have Tara Strong, which was Ember McLean, Penelope Spectra, Kevin Michael Richardson, which is Skulker, and we got Rob Paulsen's Technus, Box Ghost, and many more. So like they also, like I said, they all worked together before on Fairly Odd Parents, but so this time this crossover like was more like a reunion basically, not really a crossover in between the two shows. But again, it was by the same guy, so he kind of worked with the same people again. And then he also, Butch wrote the theme song, and the theme song originally wasn't a rap actually, but it sounds better that way. Then we have A Tale of Two Valeries. So a common occurrence in cartoons is have two actors portray one character. So this usually stems from many possibilities, such as the main actor being replaced, being unavailable, or being part of a storyline. So that is the case with Valerie Gray's character, which she used to be Danny's former foe at first, and then one of the past love interests, but she also became Vlad's previous partner. And in her debut episode, she was voiced by Gray Griffin Delisle, but for the majority of the series, she was played by Cree Summers. So there's no explanation as to why this happened, though it's highly likely that her initial appearance was pretty minor, so that they hadn't settled on a voice yet. And then Griffin Delisle would portray Gray one more time in My Brother's Keeper. So they switched up the voice acting between the two actresses. And then the origins, actually, of Tucker Foley's name. So writers often derive character names from real-life people or other characters. Tucker Foley is a case of both, as he was named after actor Chris Tucker and Axel Foley from the Beverly Hills Cop film series. So that's just a few things that you can find out from CBR.com, and it just goes down a list of like 16 things you probably didn't realize or know about from the Danny Phantom show. So you can actually watch the Danny Phantom show on Hulu right now, and I don't think it's on any other apps besides Amazon Prime. You can actually go ahead and watch actually Danny Phantom on CBS All Access, like some of the other shows we talked about today, as well as Amazon Prime. It may also be on Netflix because Netflix did do a contract with Nickelodeon, but you would just have to check out for yourself. So that's all we have today, folks. Thank you again so much for listening. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Television Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network Group. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.